so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me, as always, is T.J. Inman, and we're here to discuss Indiana football. We'll look at the college football playoff rankings that came out last night. Indiana came in at 5th again. We'll see how that impacts the game, or the game against Ohio State could impact their ranking in the following week's rankings. But there has not been enough chatter about this game, TJ. Indiana, it's a top 5 matchup for the first time since 1968 Rose Bowl. Number 5, Indiana is traveling to the Horseshoe to take on the second-ranked Buckeyes. I think every single pregame show is going to be there. Game day's there. Big noon kickoff is there. BTN tailgate is there. And I'm sure there are some other guys who we forgot about are going to be there. Noon game in Columbus. I hate labeling it as the biggest game of, Indiana football history, because we've done that in the past and it just never lives up to the hype. But there are a lot of things on the line. The Big Ten finally came out with their scenarios for Big Ten title game yesterday. Oregon has clinched a spot, either 1 or 2. That's up on our site. So this game has Big Ten title game implications. This game has college football playoff implications. And it also has Indiana football history implications. They have not beaten Ohio State since 1988. They're on a 29-game losing streak. That graphic is shown all the time as the nation's longest losing streak against a single opponent. So you have a chance to get rid of that. And then you have a chance to not rebound, but see how you respond to Curt Cignetti's contract extension. Does he rest on his laurels, which I don't think he will, or does he take it and run with it and go beat the number 2 team in the country? So, yeah, a lot on the table. How are you doing, TJ?
Fired up. Definitely excited for this one. We've kind of been pointing to this game for, once it was clear that Indiana had a legitimate shot to reach 10-0, it was, okay, let's take care of business each week. And as IU knocked down each of those foes in front of them and got to their bye week, now we're here. And Ohio State obviously has held up their end of the bargain also. And it's a top 5 matchup and an incredibly meaningful game in the Big Ten and nationally, which is not something that either of us have ever been able to say in our lifetimes as IU football fans. So it's definitely something that has me anxious and ready to see how it's going to play out. I think as we look at the college football playoff rankings, which we have to discuss, as annoying as it can be, we have to discuss because it does provide additional context to what this game means. Indiana currently sitting as the 5 rank and the 7 seed. They're ahead of Miami and BYU or Colorado, whoever the Big 12 champion ends up being in the rankings, but those teams get first-round byes. So right now, the 7 seed.
Not necessarily. Boise State gets the first-round bye.
True. I should have. Yes.
Yeah. It's the
2 teams get byes ahead of where Indiana's ranked.
Yeah. The top 5 conference champions get automatic bids to the playoff. The top 4 get the automatic bye. I think people get confused on that as well. And I think what people got to ignore, the SEC Twitter fan base is not the committee. You go and look what the committee said. They look at results in the field. I think you feel pretty good. Look, if IU goes out and does a Wisconsin 2014 and loses 59-0, your ship is probably sailed. But if there's a competitive loss, and I do really think IU has a shot at winning this game. This is a winnable game for Indiana. Doesn't mean they should win or will win, but it's this is your best shot you've had at Ohio State in, man, almost 40 years. So it's there's a lot of playoff implications, and I think everybody wanted to compare IU to BYU. They were both undefeated. Not a lot of people believed in them. But here's the thing: BYU was escaping with wins. You saw it against Utah. You saw it earlier in the season. Indiana has dominated every opponent except for Michigan. And I think the team comparison that you got to look at is Boise State. Just the profiles are similar. Boise State had a one possession loss at Oregon early in the season. That's very similar to if IU should lose to Ohio State on the road. So they're still in it. We'll see if that impacts hosting a game. But these bid stealers have got to go away. So if the ACC, if the top ACC or Big 12 team is outside of the top 12, you've got problems potentially, because those guys will get bumped up and bump a team or two out of the top 12.
Yeah, I think you're looking at Miami's season finale at Syracuse as a game that, would be an additional damaging loss for them. That would drop them out of the ACC championship game and put Clemson in. You would probably like to see SMU either drop a regular season game or just win out. And that would mean the ACC is a one bid league because Miami would have a second loss. And I don't see them getting an at-large selection in that case. So I think it's very likely at this point in time that BYU's loss leaves the Big 12 as a one bid league.
Yep.
And ACC, the path for them to get to is very, very narrow. So I think you're okay in that scenario or in that standpoint, but obviously the army of two-loss SEC teams is definitely the main foe for Indiana and their playoff chances. And the national narrative that is taking hold of undefeated Indiana's quality versus the strength of schedule of these SEC teams. It's not unexpected at all.
No.
And it will continue to be pervasive throughout the rest of this week. The only thing Indiana can do to change it is put in a really quality performance at Ohio State or just go win the game.
Just win the thing.
And that, number one, that pretty much punches your ticket to the Big 12 or the Big 10 championship game and a matchup with Oregon. Number two, it essentially clinches a playoff berth. And I'm confident saying, regardless of what else happened, as long as you beat Purdue, you would then lock in at minimum a home playoff game.
Yep.
So that's what's on the line. What we know for sure is that the postseason picture will have a lot more clarity after this weekend.
Well, you just jinxed it. It is going to be super muddy and cloudy and absolute chaos this weekend in college football because TJ.
I just mean Indiana's. I mean Indiana's in general. I think we're gonna know. We're not gonna know for sure, but we're gonna have a very good idea about where IU stands.
You're gonna eliminate a lot of possibilities.
Yep.
Regardless of what happens on Saturday. So let's get into the game. Some significant injury news coming out of Columbus as the Buckeyes starting center is out. He apparently, Seth McLaughlin tore his Achilles tendon during practice yesterday on Tuesday. So, an offensive line that was a question mark coming in just got whole lot cloudier. They're already without their starting left tackle.
Yep.
If it was Josh Simmons went out earlier in the year, so they've been playing a backup there. Their backup center has been playing guard. So it's somewhere along the line you're going to have a guy, a third string guy who you really Ohio State really didn't want to plug in. Um, how big of an impact is this on this game, TJ?
I think it's potentially very big. Um, Seth McLaughlin was a midseason All-American transfer from Alabama
He's
that
probably the favorite to win the Remington Award too, which goes to the top
very, yeah,
interior lineman.
yeah, very possible. He's been rock solid for the Buckeyes, has helped them improve their running game. Um, it's still not dominant by any means, even with McLaughlin. Where I think you really run into an issue now for Ohio State, as you said, their backup center was playing left guard. That was a reshuffling that they did uh, after the Nebraska game, I believe, uh, when they struggled to do much of anything on offense, and they've looked a lot better since then. Uh, Beat Penn State and really did a nice job preventing Penn State's defensive line from wreaking havoc on that game, which a lot of people thought they were going to. And then dominated Purdue and Northwestern. So you either are moving the guy you have been playing at left guard back to his natural position of center and then plugging in a third string guy at left guard. And at left tackle, you're already playing somebody that you did not want to be playing. Um, or you are leaving your left guard where he is, putting in a new center that hasn't seen significant snaps at any point in his career. So uh, for Indiana, I think that you're going to try, and IU is a difficult team to block in the middle anyway because of the stunts that they run.
Yep.
Um, you're going to see that even more. I think that Bryant Haynes is going to dial up whatever he can to challenge the interior of Ohio State's offensive line. And we saw it with Indiana. A shuffle on the inside of the offensive line caused some problems for IU against Michigan.
Yep.
With as Drew Evans went down with a torn Achilles. Um, and you're looking at roughly the same period of time that Ohio State has that IU had against Michigan to try to reshuffle things and figure out how to get that five to work as a unit. So I think you're going to see an increased emphasis on challenging the interior of Ohio State's offensive line with pressures. Um, we will see how that changes Ohio State's game plan. We don't know what their game plan was going to be, so we're not going to know how it changed. But my assumption was that they were going to try to control the ball and keep Indiana's offense off the field. Uh, they will probably still try to do that, but it might require more to the outside and more to the right side than they had originally planned on doing. So that's going to be a major point of interest. I think that both teams feel really good about their group of wide receivers against the corners and secondary for the opposition. Ohio State, obviously incredibly talented at wide receiver. Jeremiah Smith had his ankle twisted on a tackle. It was a dirty play by Northwestern. He's apparently good to go. That's good. You hate seeing guys get hurt in any circumstance, but especially on a dirty play like that. So
Yep.
Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, uh, Geese got at tight end. I mean, a
He might be
loaded
banged
group,
up too.
eh, but a
That's
loaded
something
group
when
of
we,
pass catchers for Ohio
yeah,
State, obviously, and a big group of wide receivers too. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is a big guy, physically imposing. Doesn't look like a freshman at all. He looks like an NFL wide receiver. Um, so I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Indiana matches up with that group of receivers. And IU, I think, feels good about their receivers' ability to make plays down the field against Ohio State's corners. Davison Igbinosun and Denzel Burke, both of whom are handsy and have been called for quite a few pass interference penalties. Oregon, in particular, really picked on Burke, and Evan Stewart had a huge day. Uh, I think that Indiana will look to stretch the field some, which you hope would then open up some things for the running game. Um, I think that both teams look at that as an opportunity to exploit things and an advantage or a matchup they can take advantage of.
yeah. Watching several Ohio State games over the last week, it's they have given up yards, and
Yeah,
they have. I just finished watching their win up at Michigan State. Michigan State had three or four good drives to open the game. Just couldn't capitalize. Turned the ball over in the red zone twice. Went for it on fourth down in the red zone and missed it. And then you get the dreaded 2 for 1. Those middle 8 minutes that coaches talked about. Ohio State is dominated. They did it against Northwestern too. That game was 7-0 with Northwestern. Ohio State comes down to score early in the second quarter, ties it up, gets another touchdown to make it 14-7. All of a sudden, Northwestern's going for it on a third and short. Bad snap happens, um, which forces a punting situation. The punt snap goes over the guy's head. They block the punt, get the ball at like the half-yard line. I still don't understand how that ball didn't go out of the back of the end zone, but physics. But then all of a sudden it's um, 21-7. Halftime happens. Ohio State gets the ball 28-7. That's all she wrote. Um, you know, Indiana's gonna have to play a clean game. You can't have so Ohio State's been doing to opponents what Indiana's been doing. They go on these runs where they score 3, 4 touchdowns, 2, 3, 4 touchdowns in a row, and put the game away.
right.
And so Indiana's going to have to, you got to take care of the ball, which they've done a very good job at. You can't have short punts like you did against Michigan. You can't have these 3-and-out drives. You can't turn the ball over inside your own 10-yard line like they did against Michigan and things like that. And you got to take your points when you could get them. And Indiana's scored 59 touchdowns this year, only 8 field goals. They're deadly in the red zone. Now, of course, you want to score touchdowns, but if it's early in the game and let's say you have a 4th and 8 from the 20, take the field. I mean, the weather forecast looks okay to be kicking. It's not going to be the nastiness that's coming to Indy in the next couple of days, but take those 3 points. They add up. It's
Well,
something Mitch they do, but early in the game, later in the game, you're going
yeah,
to need touchdowns. But if it's different. If it's 4th and 1 inside the 20, you're probably going for it. If it's 4th and 8 inside
sure.
the 20, you're probably better off taking the 3. But knowing Signetti, he'll probably go for it anyway.
No, I
But
mean,
that
yeah, just to interject on the red zone percentage, you'd mentioned teams are moving the ball but failing to score against Ohio State. That's not a recent trend either. They've been great all season in red zone defense, number one in the country in opponent red zone success rate. Teams, when they get in the red zone, are scoring only 52.17% of the time. That's just a number to you, but what that means is they are more than 3 percentage points better than everyone else in the country at red zone percentage success for opponents. That is a very telling stat.
yeah,
And at this point, you're far enough into the season where it absolutely matters. It's not a small sample size anymore. So it has been something that they have excelled at all year. And really no team has been able to solve it. Oregon was able to hit some big plays, which is kind of what swung that game for them. Um, so you're right. Capitalizing on your scoring chances is going to be absolutely critical. And I agree with you. Taking those points is going to be somewhat against Curt Cignetti's nature, but I do think that there needs to be just me giving any type of football advice to Curt Cignetti is laughable, but um, I think that there does need to be a bit of restraint on the level of aggression inside of the scoring zone. And I do think that your comfort level in your kicking game has to be higher than you thought it was going to be at this point in the year. Nico Radicic has been really good.
Yep.
So I think you do have to have some confidence early in the game, especially if your defense is having a little bit of success. Uh, that okay, we've got a chance to get some points on the board. Let's do it. Um, so I think that that's going to be critical. Um, I One thing that I have noticed with Ohio State, I do not think that their tackling in the secondary is great. Um, I
Pro-
it's
probably a good thing
good.
that Miles Price is healthy.
They've got great athletes. It's good, but on a team like Ohio State, you're not finding weaknesses, you're finding areas where they might be susceptible. And I do think that there's going to be an opportunity for guys like Omar Cooper, Miles Price, Keyshawn Williams to make plays after the catch. Um, I think that that is something that IU can potentially take advantage of. And it's something that on the other side, Indiana's tackling has to be tremendous. You cannot give caliber athletes that Ohio State has, both in the backfield with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. You cannot give those guys plus their pass catchers an opportunity to turn a little 5 yard route into a 50-yard play
Yep.
or a 25-yard play. Can't happen. That
Yep.
can snowball in the horseshoe. That can snowball on you really quickly. Um, and you mentioned those kind of avalanche of points like they've done to opponents where it's a game, it's close. Hey, wow, look at this one. Keep your eye on that score. And then 10 minutes later, they're up by 28.
Yep.
Um, that those little flurries on the road that can end your day. Um, so my perhaps biggest worry for Indiana's offense in this game is the amount of pressure that Michigan got in the second half on Indiana. Um, it really felt like for the first time, IU's offensive line and IU's offense kind of ground to a halt because of pressure that the other team was applying. Ohio State has at least two probable first round draft picks, potentially four that will go in the first two rounds of the NFL draft. Um, Ton of talent up front, and they've got a good group of linebackers and safety, Sonny Styles, that gets used as a guy they bring on blitzes that can cause a lot of issues for Indiana's offensive line. I feel good about IU using these last 2 weeks to figure out kind of what went wrong in that second half and making adjustments. But Ohio State is a top 10 team in the country at applying pressure on the quarterback. Opponent or percentage dropbacks on 10% of passing dropbacks, Ohio State gets a sack. So that's top 10 in the country, and it's much higher than what Michigan's at. So that's a big concern for me on offense. There are ways certainly to combat that. And I do expect to see a lot of quick passes. And as I mentioned, having those receivers have chances to make plays after the catch. Like those two things go hand in hand. And it wouldn't surprise me to see a lot of halfback draws, halfback screens, things that will potentially counteract that pressure that Ohio State's defense is going to bring.
Yeah, and Ohio State, they have tremendous athletes who could sniff those things out too. There have
Yeah.
been a number
Yeah.
of times where they've forced interceptions on screens and
Yep.
rushed a guy like Aiden Childs. This is, contrary to Joey Galloway's suggestion of benching Curtis Rourke, but this is where you have the luxury of having a 6-year quarterback who's played in some big environments, who's not going to get super rattled or super rushed into terrible throws all the time, like a Aiden Childs or somebody like that. Um, he'll pick you apart. And this Ohio State defense is going to be aggressive, and we've seen IU deal with aggressive defenses before. They get the ball out quickly in space. You saw it against Northwestern. You saw it against UCLA when they tried to bring 6 or 7 guys.
Yep.
So I just think there are a lot of counter punches that Indiana could pull to Ohio State's punches. And look, JT Tuamalo can wreck a game. We've seen it. We saw him basically single-handedly beat Penn State 4 years ago, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think he had like 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a touchdown in a game where Ohio State's offense didn't do much. So,
Yep.
but with the history of the series, there's always something. You go, and IU's been close. They've been real close sometimes to Ohio State. You go back to heck, even 2011 is 38-20 and stuff like that. The crazy onside kick game, and then all of a sudden it's 2014 and Tevin Coleman's going off, but you have Jalen Marshall. Jalen Marshall scores 4 touchdowns, or 2015. Sudfeld and Jordan Howard get hurt, and Xander Diamant's leading your team down for the tying score inside the 10-yard line.
Right.
And stuff like that. That's probably the last time they've been super close. But this is the best shot you've had in the last 4 decades at them, and I think you're going to get IU's best shot. So we've talked keys to the game. TJ, your matchup to watch was protecting Curtis Rourke. Does that change at all given the injury outlook on Ohio State's offensive line? Does it flip a little bit to pressuring
Right.
Will Howard?
Yeah, I think you could make a really good argument for a whole lot of matchups to watch. That's kind of the question that I had going through my head was in a game where it feels like everything matters, how do you single out one thing as like the single key? I do think the more that I've studied this and the more that I've thought about it, I do think the matchup inside of the red zone is just fascinating.
Yep.
Uh, Indiana's number one in the country in scoring percentage in the red zone. Ohio State's number 2, by the way. Indiana's scoring on 97.92% of their red zone trips, and Ohio State, as we previously mentioned, giving up scores on just over 50%. They're first in the country in that metric. So it's number 1 versus number 1. And when you have a matchup like that on November 23rd, that's telling.
Meaningful. Yeah.
So, uh, you know, I think that there's so many things you could identify, but I still think Indiana has got to keep Curtis Rourke clean, and they need to give him enough time to comfortably execute the offense. That is a tall, tall task for this offensive line. They've been up to the challenge all season. This will be their stiffest test yet. I'm sticking with that as my matchup to watch. But sometimes it just okay, this is the only thing that if Indiana does this, then they're absolutely going to win. In this particular game, there are so many things that both teams need to do well in order to come out on top. But that's the one I'm going to stick with as my matchup. But I do think the red zone part, that's one if you're keeping track of it at home during the game, I do think it's going to be very, very meaningful for the outcome.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one. It's who's going to get after the quarterback, and both teams have done an awesome job of it this year.
Yep.
So we'll see. And then it's who's going to blink first, who's going to make the mistake, who's going to fumble a ball or have a
Sure.
holding penalty to knock you out of scoring range or get a pass interference to extend a drive. And every bit of me wants to say that IU will not get the benefit of anything on Saturday based on history. Um, but
Yep,
but if we're going to get into conspiracy theories, it is better for the Big Ten if IU wins.
it is. Yeah.
But I don't know if people realize that. So I also want to shout out Nicole Auerbach, who has been tooting IU's horn, um, and saying that games matter and all that stuff. After all this stuff that these SEC fans have done on social media, she has been level headed and games have to matter and stuff like
Yep.
that. So special shout out to her, and then let's get into prediction time, TJ.
Oh, gosh. Um,
The
well,
spread right now is
12 and
IU
a half.
plus. I got it at 13 and a half on DraftKings.
Goodness
Um,
gracious. It's
it
going
was
up. That much is true.
it was still, even after the injury news, it was still at 13 and a half this morning.
Yeah.
So
Um,
who you taking?
and I think that spread, because we hear a lot, well, if Indiana is competitive, then they'll be in the playoff. What's that mean? What exactly? I know what it looks like, but what is that number? I don't think that there is a magic number that's like, well, if they keep it under 17 or if they cover the spread or
I
I don't
think this
know.
is one where you have to watch the game
Right.
because if
Right.
it's a 3 point game in the last 5 minutes and Ohio State scores a touchdown to go up 10, it kind of looks worse than it actually is.
Yeah,
Or the other way around, if IU's down by
true.
24 points and scores two late touchdowns and makes it a 10-point game, it
Yeah.
looks a lot better than it did. So hopefully people are doing their jobs and actually watching the game and not just looking at the box score.
Yes. Um, so I think that Indiana has a very definite path to winning this game. Ohio State is not an unbeatable juggernaut, and I don't say that only because, well, of course they're not unbeatable. They already lost a game. They lost to Oregon. Well, yeah, I mean they lost at number one by a point. So I'm saying that because I have seen them play, and I do think there are susceptibilities on both offense and defense that Indiana can actually have some success against. Now, there are also definite strengths, and as great as Indiana has been this season, Ohio State is the more talented team up and down the roster. And it's just in terms of raw talent from top of the roster to bottom of the roster, it's still not real close. But that doesn't really matter because of the scheme that Indiana has in place, the coaching staff they have in place, and the whole roster's not going to play.
Yeah.
It's you don't have to compare the top of Ohio State's roster to the top of Indiana's and then the bottom to the bottom. It's just the guys that are going to be on the field. And both teams are actually, barring these offensive line injuries, they're actually pretty healthy coming into this game, which I think is really good for both sides. Having said all that, I do think Ohio State being at home in an atmosphere that IU has not experienced, because they haven't. I mean, IU's road games so far, Michigan State has been the most hostile, and that is nothing compared to what IU is going to experience on Saturday inside the horseshoe. I do think that that ultimately matters a little bit. I will take Ohio State to win the game. I do think Indiana is going to give them all that they can handle. I think they're going to cover, and I think it will be a performance that is more than strong enough to lock up a playoff bid if they can handle their business against Purdue. So I'm going to go Ohio State winning this game. I think it's going to be a nip and tuck, close fought game the entire way. Buckeyes win it. I'm going to go 24 to 21.
Ooh, okay. Um,
So I guess I
yeah,
went under the total, but
yeah. I've been going back and forth on this all week. I do think it'll be a close game, something within a touchdown. Um, I think the injury to McLaughlin really hurts Ohio State, and usually their fans are like, it's no big deal. We got another 5-star guy to plug in there, but he was brought in to plug in a hole on that offensive line, and now you're kind of jerry rigging an offensive line with the third string guy that at some position, whether it's at center, whether it's at left guard, or something like that against the defensive line that's been very good. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do it. I think Indiana takes this one 31-27 over Ohio State. Yeah, it's going to be a raucous crowd, a raucous environment. Even though IU's played in the shoe before, it's kind of been a game that fans aren't really into, or they're into
no,
early and they leave. This
yeah,
is a
it's a
big
layup for
time.
them.
Yeah, this is a big time, going to be a big time football atmosphere. Um, but Indiana's handled everything that has been thrown at them. And it's been every game this season outside of Western Illinois and Charlotte has been, well, Indiana's finally playing a team who could test them. And, well, all those teams apparently that IU passed that test stink. And now it's, well, IU's finally playing a team who could test them. And until it happens, I'm not going to pick against them. I'm not.
Yeah,
Um, and I think I use the recipe to follow is kind of like Northwestern's to me. And I know you think that Ohio State is going to follow Northwestern's recipe against them, but you got to get some chunk plays. Northwestern did that with their two wide receivers.
yeah.
And IU could do that, but they ate up a ton of time. And
Hmm.
I think we've seen IU do it against Washington. Although I think the passing game comes
Second
into
half.
more, yes, comes into play there. Between that I think the end of the drive at the end of the first half, and then outside the interception in the second half. But those last few drives in the second half were at least 7 minutes long and ended
Yeah.
in points. And if you could do that, you're going to walk out of Columbus with the win and control your destiny to win the Big Ten title,
Hmm.
um, and then B, to get a bye. And especially, I think if you win Saturday, you're at minimum hosting a playoff game.
Right. That's the
Um,
floor.
yeah, that's unless you lose to Purdue. If you lose to Purdue, just throw everything else out the window. You're going to the whatever Cheez-It Bowl that. Um, yeah, if you lose to Purdue, you don't deserve to go to the playoff anyway. But I don't see that happening. So yeah, 31-27 IU. I think all this noise and all these people doubting Indiana is just giving Kirk Cignetti fuel. And I think Joey Galloway coming on saying Indiana should rest their guys. This game is going to be a loss. They can't protect Curtis Rourke. He's going to get hurt. It's, I think the offensive line is going to take that personally as well. And this team
Sure.
has embodied Kirk Cignetti, and they look for a reason to be pissed off at things. And now they have it. And so I think they go in, I think they play well, and I think they beat Ohio State.
I certainly hope that your version is accurate. That and it's not outlandish by any means. I don't think that you're coming up with pie in the sky stuff. I think that like I said, there is a path there for Indiana to take advantage of some of Ohio State's susceptibilities, not weaknesses, but susceptibilities, and also accentuate
Sig-
Indiana's strengths.
yeah,
Um, because there are real
And
strengths that IU has that
yep,
can also come out in this game. So I think there's a path to that. Um, I think the most kind of what I'm continuing to try to remind myself um, is that regardless of the outcome of this game on Saturday, it has been so much fun to be a part of the conversation and to have as meaningful as football can be in the middle and end of November.
yep,
It's an absolute blast. It really
yep.
is.
Yeah, it's and we discussed this in the group text, and I maybe should just stay off of social media more. The SEC fanboys is and that argument is like kind of sucking the joy out of it a little bit, and I'm trying not to let that happen. But this has been a phenomenal year,
Yeah.
regardless what happens against Ohio State. That is sustainable. Now, will Indiana win that 10 games next year? I don't know, but I don't really care about next year yet. We'll
No.
see.
Right.
Schedules
Right.
change and all that stuff, but that's the beauty of college football. The game should matter, and enjoy it. This is you don't get big games often, and when you get them, you need to enjoy them. And IU's had a handful of awesome big game atmospheres this year. This is probably the top of the list. Enjoy it, and we'll see how it comes out. And keep coming back to Hoosier Huddle. We'll have all the breakdowns on
Yes, we will.
HoosierHuddle.com.
Yep.
Interviews with players, stories on Signetti, the playoff stuff, all that stuff. We have it, and I think we do it better than everybody else. But that's my biased opinion. So
Hoosier Huddle
HoosierHuddle.com.
bias. It's
Uh,
everywhere.
yeah, it's everywhere. Um, HoosierHuddle.com at Hoosier_Huddle on Twitter or X. And then we are on Blue Sky as well at Hoosier Huddle. We're new enough where we didn't need an underscore TJ or a Hoosier Huddle one
Ooh,
exclamation point, stuff like that. So
on the
head
ground
over to
floor.
yeah, head over to Blue Sky. It's a fun platform. It's kind of like the old Twitter where it was enjoyable and not just ads and political crap. Um, and then, of
Not
course,
yet.
check over to our YouTube page as well. So
Right.
enjoy it. Indiana kicks off against Ohio State at noon in Columbus. You could have your choice of live pregame shows between ESPN, College Game Day, Big Noon Kickoff, and BTN Tailgate. Uh, Enjoy it.